Okay. Welcome to the April 4th Climate Action Committee. April 7th. 7th, okay, 4/7, and so first item of business, the minutes from the last meeting. Any discussion? Motion to approve? So moved. Okay. Second. Okay. And we'll take a roll call on that. Barry?
Yes.
Aye.
Paul?
Yes. I have to abstain because I wasn't here, but
Okay, I'll
it's fine.
and Paul Moulton?
Aye.
Lynn?
No, I wasn't there either. I did.
Hi there.
No. Okay. So the minutes are approved. Unanimously. Okay.
Good shoulder,
Jet
yeah.
that up, because I didn't bring it with me.
Yes, I can. For a second. Hi, how's it
Yeah,
going,
hey.
everyone? There's a
Hey,
seat over
one-
here at the front. Oops.
No, hello.
Right here, let me grab a chair from the, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, there's two big chairs next door in the sorry about that.
You don't have to move Paul. Oh, in here.
Yeah, in the kitchen.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, our first item, the open meeting law was updated or renewed so that we can continue business as usual in terms of having hybrid meetings and hybrid participation. Thankfully.
Is there a end date to that, or is that just open-ended at this point?
I
I think it's 2 years.
yeah, it's
I'm
like by
sure.
7. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I'm happy for that because I think it also gets rid of the business of unexcused absences and so forth. And,
I don't have to resign from every committee.
so next, the, embodied carbon working group.
All right. So if you recall, I was asked to lead a small group to put together a primer of white paper for embodied carbon. What it is, why it's important, what municipalities in Massachusetts can do about it, and then what we can't do about it, what the state's working on, and then some examples. So we tried to do it as a mini group. We tried to get legal counsel to weigh in on whether or not we were allowed to meet without open meeting. We never got there, so we never got a firm response. So what I ended up doing, and just in the full interest of transparency, I used ChatGPT. And I used their deep research feature, which is a sort of a premium feature that goes out and you can specify the parameters you wanted to look at. And it came back with a very well-written, well-researched paper, probably much better than we would have done as a working group. So we have this now. And I'm not going to go through it today. It's something that I've shared with Gabby and Nick, and I think you can decide what we want to do with it as a group next. But what it does have in it is a definition of embodied carbon, which is, I think most of us know, it's all of the materials, the processes, the transportation, the energy that goes into building a building. It's not the operational costs, it's the sunk costs that get the building up. And once they're there, you know, that carbon that was emitted in the production of that building is in the atmosphere for 100 years. So the question is, how do you reduce embodied carbon, given that on whole, it represents, 11 to 18% of emissions on average for municipality. The report goes on to talk about specific strategies that can be used in Massachusetts. Public construction requirements is one area, zoning and building regulations is another. There's voluntary programs, outreach, education, influence type steps we can do. There's policies around waste management and recycling that can be adopted. And then there are goal settings, zoning, master plans, tracking and reporting. So these are all the tools that municipalities do have. There are limits. I think we're very well aware that you cannot adjust building codes. You can't change global manufacturing processes. You can't touch large scale infrastructure projects. And there's really limited enforcement capacity for a municipality on things. And then the report also has examples of what Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Brookline, Amherst are doing. Somerville is another one. So I think it's, what I had suggested to Nick and Gabby when I finished this, and I reviewed it with the small working group anyway, even though we weren't going to meet, just to make sure there's no major inaccuracies. It might be worthwhile having it as a homework assignment and everybody have a chance to read it, and then we can come back and discuss it at a future meeting. And decide whether or not there's any actions that we recommend that the town take from that point on.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea, and then see if we want to come up with a Needham specific list.
Right. I mean, there are some small steps that are suggested in here that don't require a lot of investment by the town and aren't requirements or mandates of builders and homeowners, but they're a way to kind of put a toe in the water around embodied carbon and start educating. The municipal projects, we might already be doing these things. I'm not even sure if there's lifetime, they call them lifetime, sorry, I know the acronym, but I forget what it stands for. LCAs stand for
Life cycle cost analysis.
life cycle
Analysis.
carbon. Yeah, okay. You got it. So are we, I don't know if we're doing those today in our municipal project as part of it's life cycle analysis and design. So, that's something that could be used with choosing the materials that go into the public buildings and also making decisions on whether or not to repurpose versus build new.
It could also be something, not as something we can legislate, but to inject it into the conversation with the tree committee or the large house committee, just to get people starting to think about the embodied carbon aspect of ripping everything down.
Right. Though to be sure, I don't know that the LCAs deal with tree removal. They deal specifically with the materials that go into the buildings themselves, right? It's the
Yeah,
supply chain.
So you're strictly you're not looking at in this version, the site work, for example.
It's not, it's less about the site than what you're using.
Right,
what materials, what's the supply chain, what's going into the building itself.
Yeah.
And this would be only for municipal.
That's just one of the tools that they recommend, is to look at municipal projects and lead by example. I don't know if we're doing these today. Maybe we are already doing these as requirements for some of these projects.
I think this could be a really cool project for seniors, like high school seniors that are interested in the sustainability field. There are a lot of I think free or relatively low cost life cycle assessment tools online where you put in information and it helps to make those pathways for you. I think that could be a neat way to sort of distribute the work and get people engaged.
I know from past PVPC projects, when buildings are trying to get LEED silver or LEED gold. That's part of the score sheet that will get
Yeah.
points for eventually getting that kind of certification. So I know we did a little bit of that on Sneed Williams School.
And that's something that in your report, Stephen, you know, by encouraging lead or putting, encouraging rebuilding rather than tear down, that it's not directly embodied carbon related, but it pushes that agenda.
Well, I think the Emery Grover building decision was influenced, repurposing the existing structure was influenced in part either by an LCA or just an acknowledgement that there's a lot of embodied carbon in that structure already. And so by
Yeah.
repurposing it, we actually reduced the carbon footprint of that project. But I don't know that it was a determining factor. Wasn't, right? It was mostly cost, right? Cost, and there's option, there's the hillside option and.
Well, there really weren't, unfortunately, very many options that were acceptable. Let's put it that way.
It's also the historical component of it.
That was an influence
That
as well.
My understanding is that we do LCAs for every project, but not, I forget the term from the report, it was like a, whole building LCA versus more of like an operational LCA. So I think it would be a good piece to, confirm with building design and construction. I know we have to do that for lead projects, but even ones outside of lead, I think that's happening to an extent, but maybe not to the same level of depth as we could benefit from.
Can you repeat what LCAs y'all currently do?
So my understanding is when we do LCAs now, it's more focused on like an operational assessment. So if we're looking at like a comparison between two different like heating and cooling systems, for example, like we look at the longevity of those systems, maintenance costs, things like that. But I don't know that we do that same kind of assessment with the like building material, like one type of concrete versus another.
Right.
So
This,
we could check.
there's some examples in here. I think Cambridge, maybe Brookline have started a policy around the material selection, that it needs to be 10% better than the standard with regard to carbon.
Also, very few ground up, other than like Sunita Williams, I don't think we've really had a de novo ground up.
Right.
Probably the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
They've all been rehabbed. so
Correct.
Renovations.
Even then, like picking your materials for rehabbed stuff, would that be worthwhile? Would that, I mean, or would that just be minuscule amount of carbon that would be saved?
Well, just by keeping, I think what we're going towards is putting embodied carbon into the language
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
building by the town and hopefully
you just don't want
eventually by
to,
others.
well, yeah, I guess, so if we do have a ground up versus.
So like Pollard. If that
Yeah.
goes through, that's a big one, right?
It will be, I mean, it's
Ground up.
renovation,
It's all renovation.
essentially, it will be primarily a renovation and rebuild of certain addition, there'll be some de novo structures as part of it, but,
But they're repurposing a lot of the existing structure.
well, we sort of have to because it's they're gonna do it or try to do it while the kids are there,
Phases,
like we did with the high school.
right?
Limited space also.
Well, exactly.
Right, you can't build next to a whole new junior high school next to it.
But. So the purpose of this exercise, though, is to make this part of the ongoing process for future projects, or is that consideration, or?
I think it's more considerate. My charge is really to help us learn what it is
Yeah,
and what
okay.
people are doing. I think that's as far as this goes.
Yeah.
This doesn't get to a.
No,
recommendation. Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
make people aware.
Yeah. So there could be a requirement we recommend out of this. But there's limited tool chest, and there is stuff happening at the state level that might preempt the need to do something at the local level. So they talk about some embodied carbon legislation working groups, committees that are working on whether or not that should be added to our state code or going about beyond building codes, for example.
But I think it really grew out of a discussion we had where it was, what about embodied carbon? And then, well, what is it?
Right.
And we sat and batted it around for 45 minutes and
Yeah.
said, Stephen,
And ChatGPT generated
Do
it for me in
something.
30 minutes.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
so what's the carbon cost of that check?
Well, it was, don't talk.
Right, like one thing at a
That's right,
I
you're
think if you compare it against the sandwiches I would have had to eat to actually do that
True.
research on my own.
When you share that document, would you mind sharing the prompts you used?
Oh,
to,
sure.
To generate, I'm always interested in.
Yeah, I can do that. It does require a premium version of
What's
ChatGPT.
the premium version called?
It's. The feature is called Deep Research and it's not available on their free version.
Oh, my employer pays for it.
It's called $20 a month.
It's $20.
Oh,
It's
that's
$20. Yeah. Are you using it?
I don't really have much of a need in the ordinary course.
Yeah, but you knew it was $20 a month. How did you know that?
Cause I have used it and they keep trying to upsell me and.
There you go.
It will make you need it.
Pardon?
It will make you need it.
Yeah, I don't have enough reason to, but other than personal curiosity and stuff.
So that's
Okay.
my summary of that.
Thank you.
So you're okay for us to share
Please,
the version that you shared with us so far? There's been no changes since then.
there's been no changes since then. I saw you had a note yesterday that I didn't address.
I think I did, and then I deleted it.
Okay, that's why I couldn't address it. I was looking. for it.
Okay. Okay, so I can share out to the group that document.
Thanks. And so is the goal for us to try to review that before our next meeting or put it on a future agenda?
Yeah, I think that's
for
a
deeper
great idea.
discussion?
Yeah, I think
How
so.
many pages is it?
I think I tried to limit it to about 12 pages or so.
It's 11 with the bibliography.
Is it? That was one of the parameters I used in the prompt.
Okay.
All right. I like it.
That was smart.
Keep it to less than 12 pages and for non-technical audience.
Okay, and now the EV working group,
Yeah, so,
with or without AI.
yeah, right, no AI yet. Well, now it might be a good idea, but, so Paul and I and AJ have been, working on this, running up against some stumbling blocks, but not surprising. But AJ, why don't you sort of, review what we've tried to do to this point and what we need to do?
I tried to reach out to a couple of the buildings that we referenced at the last meeting, especially like the bigger ones. Just to schedule a quick meeting. So I sent emails to each of them and I got 0 responses. And since then, I've just had a kind of a busy few weeks, so I will work on that more, either sending another email or just going in person and asking for a meeting. And then I think from there, we can get a good idea of what's working with their EV charging.
This is commercial buildings.
Yeah, they're all like apartment buildings. And so I think each apartment building uses different companies that provide the electricity. So some are free with the rent that you pay for the building, others you have to pay for how many hours you're in the spot. Others you have to pay for how much electricity you actually use. So each of them is different. So I think it'd be helpful to see what's like the best thing, what residents like, what is working for the building. And then from there, hopefully we can make some recommendations for new buildings or buildings looking to improve on which avenue to take.
I can help you out with there. My mom used to.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Remember.
Great.
Yeah, I think we should go together.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I should be expected just for you to go to the,
Yeah.
to the office and then, just surprise them. So we'll work out a time.
Yeah.
I know it's hard with your schedule, but we'll figure something out.
And the point of me going, I think, could have been to schedule a meeting for both of us.
Yes, okay.
So maybe like I can go in and like, can we meet?
Yeah.
At some point
Okay.
online. So yeah, we can figure that out.
Do you have a list of the buildings you're trying to reach out to?
I do. It was Modera, it was Charles River Landing. And Kendrick, yeah, so those are the three.
Yeah. Those are the biggest ones. Paul, you made an inquiry?
Yeah, so I spoke to the manager of the Whole Foods in Wellesley. I'm not sure how many folks go to that place, but you may have noticed that they recently, as part of their parking lot redevelopment, they added some new level 2 chargers. So they used to have ChargePoint chargers. Now they are from Shell. So I had a little chat with him. Unfortunately, it sounds like a lot of the decisions related to the vendor and even the pricing occurs at the Whole Foods corporate level. But I guess they did evaluate a bunch of different vendors when they were looking to replace ChargePoint. It's not clear exactly why they chose to move away, because I know that the other locations within town are ChargePoint, and frankly, I tried to use the Shell ones a few times
They don't work.
and found them to be very terrible.
They're the worst ones I've been to.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Since they're owned by Shell.
And
Who are not
the other thing that was interesting is that, so I sort of assumed that Whole Foods would, I don't know, get some sort of revenue share from it or something, but apparently Shell gets everything. There's nothing that goes to Whole Foods, at least not that he was aware of, which may in part explain why the pricing is so terrible. I honestly cannot, so they used to be free. Now they are no longer free, and the pricing is more expensive than what we pay on a kilowatt hour basis. Plus, there's a fixed fee every time you use it. So I'm not sure if people are going to A, struggle to figure out how to get them to charge, and then B, look at the pricing, but I would be shocked if they ever get used. So, if there's no local sort of feedback loop on how well those are used, I'm not sure how successful that that model will be. He gave me the name of the gentleman who coordinates the construction and sort of the project manager for the entire New England region. I haven't reached out to them, sort of waiting to see if it was something worth doing or not.
What
And
do you think? Is it or not? Based on everything that you've just sort of gone through.
I mean, it doesn't give me a whole lot of, I mean, if everything's happening at the corporate level, it doesn't seem like even the project manager for New England would necessarily have a lot of insight. So I'm inclined to say no. I guess the only thing that I found valuable in my discussion was that the town of Wellesley, I mean, the parking lot had chargers before, so this is maybe less of an issue, but part of the approval from the town to do the parking lot redevelopment was to put in the chargers. But they already had chargers before, so I guess, all the infrastructure was already there, so it was sort of less of a stick for them versus someone else who's doing a new parking lot that would maybe have to pay for conduits and trenching and so forth if they didn't have chargers. But I thought that was the one interesting nugget, is that, through town here, if there's someone that's doing some parking lot work, right, where they're going to be digging everything up in the first place, then you might as well throw in the requirement that they put down some conduits, or at least have the underground infrastructure done, so that in the future, if we wanted to put chargers in, it was there.
Yeah, I don't know, to the extent we have requirements like that in Needham, but I'm happy to ask planning, if that's something that we've looked at before, or, yeah, because I think it's a great idea.
Also to require, if we're gonna require, let's say you require somebody to put a charger in, to require that it be maintained for 10 years or something,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that some of the other chargers I've seen, they put them in and then
Yeah, great.
they're
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Paul, do we know if when the charger was installed, does the town or the Whole Foods pay for any of this, or is just basically Shell comes in and does everything?
That's sort of what he was saying, is that Shell does everything.
I see.
So they went through some sort of procurement process. Yeah, it's not, yeah, unfortunately, I was sort of hoping to get a little bit more clarification on how they selected, and, especially like why they moved away from ChargePoint. You'd think that Shell would have to have a pretty compelling reason for them to upend that relationship, especially if unless Whole Foods is making like across the board changes, right? You don't want to have to be managing different vendors and have different platforms to see, but maybe Whole Foods just doesn't care if the charges are up or not. They sort of just see it as a marketing thing. But I did come across another website. I have no affiliation to this company, but it's a tool that seems to use the power of maps to help figure out the layout and site identification and try to give you some potential budgets for some of the work, and then overlay some information about the public information that's available in terms of utility infrastructure. So I'll drop the link in here. Folks can have a look. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of it before. It's evlogic.ai. Seems interesting. But I haven't really looked at a site, but it could be an interesting sort of pilot for a location, or at least a way to maybe cross-reference a previous project and sort of see how well did this estimate line up with what we did in the past.
Are there candidate businesses in town that people would think would be good sites for placement of EVs? Like, for example, where I charge at a place in a shopping center in Connecticut when I go visit relatives and just park there. Or like the Dunkin' Donuts I go to on the way down there. There's some of the Dunkins have a level 3 charger, for example. I've been trying to think of what in town would be the places where people might consider, or businesses that would consider placing these things or getting involved with this.
Two of the bigger ones are TripAdvisor and Coca-Cola. When I was just driving by each of those places and none. So I'm not sure how many people that work there.
I think TripAdvisor has some in the parking garage.
Oh, in the garage? No, I didn't look in the garage. Okay.
Staples, I would think would be a candidate, just because they've got a good commitment towards sustainability, they're locally headquartered and the parking lot is not always full, so.
It is anecdotal, but my sense is that a lot of businesses that rely on people going in and out, like 15 minutes, half hour, don't want to load up their spaces with EV chargers because they don't want cars squatting. Whereas office buildings where people are going to be there for 8 hours are prime locations for these, because you want to encourage your workforce. It depends on who you're hiring, but if you're going after people who drive EVs for your workforce, you want to have those.
Or
So I would look at office buildings.
Chili's does a lot of chargers, and I know in upstate New York, they partnered with National Grid, probably National Grid doing it, but that's a corporate fast casual restaurant like that we don't have as a candidate because people are there for a couple of hours.
The risk is always that non-EV cars park at these spots.
Yeah.
The enforcement is poor. So I think if you're in a private corporate lot, like you said, where the incentive was, for people who own EVs to do that, and there was some sort of control over that lot, you might get better luck.
Right.
So.
Fast food places, usually when I'm on my trips, are where you find the level 3s.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be stopping for 15 minutes to half an hour. We don't have a lot of fast food here.
I think the YMCA locations could be interesting. Like, if folks are going to work out for an hour or go to a class for something like that. I'm not sure, besides the 2 Y locations in town, if there are other fitness places where people would go. But I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is, as you said, if you've got limited parking, because I've seen that in my work where somebody leased out a parking lot and then customers couldn't come in.
The Y is tight.
Y is very tight.
Parking's very tight for most businesses.
Yeah. I don't know if there is a financial incentive for putting level 3 chargers on a lot. I mean, if there was a revenue share for the owner.
The ones I've seen elsewhere have been a straight lease where
They lease
they
4
lease,
spots.
yeah,
5 spots.
we're 20 spots and put it in and then. It's no different than leasing your roof for solar, except the solar panels don't and trash and take up parking lot.
What about,
But it's,
sorry, what about, and I'll be the first to admit, I don't know much about these, but like houses of worship where they collect money from people who go there, right? Like I know churches do that. I don't know if temples do that or not, but that could be kind of an interesting way to collect revenue in an indirect way if you had chargers and people went to services and they, they contributed to those houses of worship through the charging revenue.
I think it's worth kind of as an avenue of investigation, just what are some of the general parameters in terms of,
Deals.
how people view it, and you probably will find this with the apartments as well. What are they considering? What's the business model when somebody's outsourcing, versus doing it
Themselves.
as an employee benefit versus some,
Yeah.
and kind of the considerations.
I can tell you that when my mom was living in Modera, we would get the emails. And there were frequent emails about cars squatting on the EV charger, and they had like 2 chargers. And so they limit your charging time to no more than 2 hours. Now this is a 30 amp charger. 2 hours is gonna give you 15 to 30 miles.
Yeah.
Right? So how does that provide any benefit to the renter? Who needs
Right.
to be charged for
Yes.
tomorrow's commute?
Correct.
It doesn't give anything. So ideally what Modera needs is probably another 10 chargers. Because the demand is now outstripping the supply.
For the residents there?
Yeah, but how do they recognize that and make the investments in it? I don't know if that's something that this committee can help with.
Are there any kind of general, does MEPC have anything, or, I would think there's a general fact book on strategies for,
Encouraging.
yeah, even within the people who build multifamily housing.
Yeah, I can reach out to our MAPC contact and see if they have any suggestions.
I do think those apartment buildings though are key. If you want to unlock EV usage, already you're seeing a lot of people putting chargers in their driveways. These are well-off people who own their homes.
Exactly.
But if you want to really turn the page, the apartment buildings need to have better supply. Either that's got to be level 3 chargers somewhere in town where they can go to and within 15 minutes get 200 miles, or it's got to be chargers at the buildings or near the buildings. I think Office is already taking care of this. I mean, most of the companies that I'm aware of around the area, especially in the tech space, are putting chargers in for their employees.
Does anybody know how, like, what the process is to install a charger into a parking lot, an empty parking lot? Does that cost a lot for a building if they wanted to do that?
Depends on a few factors. If you want to do just level 2 chargers, it's a lot cheaper than doing level 3 chargers. I think it's like a 10x multiplier. Is that right? You know this
Yeah.
because you've been looking at this.
Yeah, it's a lot more expensive. Yeah, a big factor is also like what the capacity is of that location, like do they have to add another transformer or another utility pole? If they don't, it's significantly less expensive. There are still really good rebates for multifamily EV charger installations. There are not for many other commercial properties, but multifamily still has good rebates available. But it is significantly more expensive. It's like a $50,000 project compared to like that's up to $1,000 project. Actually.
Yeah, it depends on how far you have to trench.
Yeah, yeah.
All these things.
Mhm.
So we've got a lot of areas to.
So the payback period must be really long
For a lot
for
of
investing
ways.
in one of these chargers.
For level threes, yes, yeah, that, I mean, that's part of the reason it's much more expensive, like the, cost per kilowatt hour that they set is significantly more expensive to try to make that revenue back more quickly.
I mean, even 50,000, it's gonna take you a while to.
Yeah, yeah,
There is an NAPC pilot program looking at bidirectional charging. So they're basically using energy from cars or vehicles for grid support. So I think that they're doing a pilot. I think it's a municipal pilot, but there is this EV working group through LECP. Maybe you see that.
I am on that one,
You're on that. one.
yes.
I can't go to all those. ones, but If you learn anything. let
Yeah.
us know. Thank you.
Okay.
So our goals will be to create contact with one or two of these apartment sources and see if we can sort of go sort of soup to nuts on how they procured and what they've done and what usage they get. So we'll sort of try to get a profile of one experience to start with.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good start.
Or 10-year.
Yeah.
Good one.
You wanna look at a unit. I'll get there, we get their attention.
That's true.
Look at this. Independent.
Okay. I think obviously we can go on forever, but the next item, line it funded.
Yes, I just wanted to provide a very brief update that last week at the finance committee meeting, the finance committee did vote to recommend to adopt the article that we had discussed previously for match funding that would be used if the town was awarded grants in support of actions related to the climate action roadmap. That was the $250,000 article. And there was a lot of discussion and good questions asked. But yeah, that was the outcome. Barry actually made the recommendation for the motion. So yeah, good discussion, but just wanted to let folks know.
So that is on the warrant now.
Yeah, well, it was on the warrant.
Okay, but
Anyway.
recommended by FinCom.
Yes. Not unanimously, but yes, recommended.
Mhm.
But it's fine. It's unusual. It's, you know, it's Gabby's experience. It's not the norm for how we like to do things or historically things have been done without specificity. And but the reality of, I think is been articulated well, the reality of how the nature of these grants, the timing doesn't fit with our process neatly.
Mhm.
Do you feel like it has sufficient controls on it?
Well, I think that's partly our job here, you know,
Yeah.
to some degree, in terms of, you know, making sure that what we're going after is pertinent, relevant, valuable, and, you know, meets with the priorities. I think, you know, there'll be a lot of, you know, my guess is this will become somewhat of an annual item. Hopefully, if the opportunities are there, and so showing some, you know, how it'll be important, certainly the first, you know, this being the first time it's gonna be discussed, it's been discussed. I think it'll be important to really make sure that what the money is used for has real value to the town. And I think some of the projects that, you know, as Gabby pointed out in her write-up, you know, are potentially highly valuable, have a great ROI, and if we can get them, that'd be great. Honestly, anything related to stormwater, I think, you know, given what's gone on in the, you know, I think would be awesome and encouraged. So I think how it gets used, especially early on, will be important for, you know, going forward. Because we don't really tend to. Yeah, most everything is approved for a specific reason, not in, you know, obviously. You know, as long as it makes sense and is important to the town, it's never been an issue, but not
Is it
having.
the timing piece?
Well, it's like you know, it's kind of viewed as I don't wanna call it a slush fund, but
Yes,
just the
yeah.
concept of something with not known uses is, you know, it just invites potential. I don't wanna use the word, abuse is too strong a word, but again, it's, we're just having. Historically, the finance committee likes, is kind of controlling, like, in terms of. Everything that, not that we, you know, we don't actually have the final approval, but. You know, I think. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some discussion at town meeting as well about it.
Is there any process that the FinCom has discussed about when actual grants come forward that they should be brought to as an FYI or?
Nope.
Nope.
No,
Okay.
no.
Should there be?
No, I don't think so, actually. I mean, if that was gonna be the case, then, you know, we have a $2 million reserve fund for the town that, you know, people come to us periodically when there's unexpected and unforeseen bills, you know, that will, you know, come for, that we sign off on. And that's what the reserve fund's for. We talked about that for these things. If there's, you know, something that, you know, that's the alternative. If there's something that, you know, is really important and we need to, you know, you need to get authorization in between a town meeting structure, that's the mechanism for it. Which is why is, you know, there's reluctance to do things like this that are somewhat open-ended, but, you know, I think, you know, honestly, it's not huge amount of money given the town budget, and, you know, I think you got a little bit of rope and see how, you know, see how it gets
Use
utilized.
it wisely.
Yeah, no, I'm not overly concerned. I think this group obviously, you know, will, you know, will look at all the opportunities, and to some extent, I look at this group as the watchdog in essence.
You've given us our charge.
On to town meeting. What's next?
Gonna be fun.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's it for that one.
Okay, now. For our future presentation.
Yes, well, I guess. If, I don't know if folks had time to review this memo, but I had just tried to capture. Some background information about prior recommendations to the select board. And I also tried to capture what the top 3 actions were for each of the 6 roadmap categories based on the discussions that have taken place over the last few months. So I'll just maybe go over this briefly in case folks didn't have a chance to read through this, but.
So the purpose of this, I'm sorry, is.
Oh, sorry, the purpose is that the purpose is that the committee typically makes a recommendation to the select board before the next fiscal year for a few priorities to emphasize. So I've tried to just capture the discussion so far with the hope that that will inform the committee's discussion about recommendations for FY26.
And then our goal will be to both narrow this list and put them into actionable recommendations so that they have something that they can implement as opposed to
Yeah,
think about doing good things.
yeah, exactly. And
So I'm sorry, I didn't read this originally. Is this the draft of the recommendation?
No, this
No,
is a
no,
summary.
no.
We've
Summary of
gone
what we've done.
through,
Okay.
we've got,
yeah,
you
Got
know,
it, okay.
I was thinking maybe 3 recommendations.
18 items and we've got to,
Yeah,
and I don't think we necessarily have to narrow them all down tonight. That's my feeling is,
no, I mean, I think it would be nice to get a
6.
letter to the select board by the end of May.
yes.
If possible.
So if we can have kind of, we know the list a little bit or discuss our preferences on some of these, and then we can have by our next meeting in May, have a set of priorities,
That'll be helpful.
come up with, go from 6 to
3 or 4.
So the first four that are listed here, just as a reminder of the Climate Action Planning Committee recommendations from FY 25. So developing a targeted outreach campaign to support weatherization and electrification of homes and businesses. This is in progress. The hope is to have this launched later this year. Opting into property assessed clean energy. This is also in progress. We have some draft language from Mass Development, and I believe we're on track to get this to the select board before the end of the fiscal year. Adopting an EV first policy, the select board and the school committee already did this one, so that one's complete. And then adopting strategies to protect and enhance Needham's tree canopy. This one's also in progress, with the formation of the tree preservation planning committee, which will be taking this one up. And then the select board also added the establishment of a comprehensive climate communication strategy for FY 25/FY 26. This one is not started yet, and I would anticipate it will happen in FY 26. So just so you have context for where we are on prior recommendations. Now switching gears to the rest of the roadmap for top 3 actions that were identified. So for clean energy, the top 3 from previous discussions were identifying sites to install solar and storage on public property. We did receive that MAPC TAP grant. That's actually kicking off this week. So that'll be looking at municipal parking lot solar canopy assessments. The second one was reestablishing a Solarize campaign. And then the third was identifying sites and assessing the feasibility for network geothermal and expansion of energy storage capacity as well.
Did we discuss that one?
We did discuss that one. Yeah. There has not been a great deal of work on this yet with planning. I only know of one grant program that's funded through HEAT that helps support communities that are trying to identify these kinds of locations. But I would say this is like a newer emerging topic for municipalities.
There's only been like a couple pilots, right?
Yeah. Framingham, Boston. I believe the Lowell one is not happening anymore. I think National Grid pulled out of that.
Yeah.
And Needham Housing Authority has already ruled that out as well, right?
Yes, that was ruled out for.
Is the Linden Streets not big enough for that investment?
I think it was a cost / feasibility issues, because they would need to get multiple other locations hooked up with that system as well, and just became too much. For net zero buildings, PACE again was listed as a top one, but that one was already a recommendation and it is in progress. Partnering with the Needham Housing Authority to identify funding opportunities. This is in progress. Continue to provide recommendations to the Housing Authority. The third was developing educational materials and conducting targeted outreach campaign around Mass Save incentives. So this is one that was planned to connect to the Electrify Needham campaign that still targeting for later this year. The next category for transportation, the first one was revising local requirements to ensure compliance with MBTA communities. That's on the May 2025 warrant for town meeting. Second was creating a public awareness campaign for electric vehicles, charging stations and incentives. The goal was to have this also be part of the Electrify Needham campaign that would be taking place later this year. And then the third was installing EV charging stations and priority parking locations and supporting electrification with the installation of level 3 chargers. This was 2 actions, and the recommendation was to combine this into 1 from our prior discussions. For natural resources and waste, develop and enact a tree preservation bylaw. This connects back to the town tree preservation planning committee, conducting a baseline tree inventory. There is a warrant article that includes proposed funding for tree inventory as part of a forest management plan for the town.
Do you know how much they're proposing?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I could pull that for you. Yeah. And the third was auditing the waste stream in municipal facilities and schools from purchasing to disposal. And then for governance, reporting implementation of progress on the roadmap across various entities and updating the GHG inventory and roadmap every 5 years. Second was educating departments, boards, committees, town meeting about roadmap objectives and applicability. And then third was developing and promoting a green business designation program. I will note that we're going to have a student intern this summer, and that is going to be their focus for the summer, is looking at some models for green business designation programs and putting together a proposal.
Is there a model for that elsewhere?
Yes, there are some
Yeah.
examples in other communities, so the hope is that this intern will pull all those examples together.
And what does the designation mean?
And
Oh.
yeah, that's a great question. It varies based on the community. So for some, it's something gets added to their website. There's something on the town or city website acknowledging that they're within a group of designated
Out in the
businesses.
back.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah, pros and cons, yeah. And then the last category is resilience and public health. The top 3 for this one were conducting a targeted outreach campaign related to some of these climate change driven risks and best practices. The second was updating zoning bylaws to require spaces in critical building systems to incorporate flood protection measures and prevent stormwater runoff from damaging neighboring properties. And the third was assessing and improving accessibility of climate and emergency preparedness educational resources to ensure they reach everyone.
On the second one there, is the planning board looking at that, or is that something, I can't remember how we went.
There's a new floodplain district on the warrant this year, but I don't think that's more like applicable buildings within that district. It's not looking at what I believe this is trying to get at, which is actual changes to structures. So like, for example, like new development having utilities be on the second floor.
Right,
something like that.
okay.
That's the first part. What about the preventing stormwater runoff? Is there anything towns can do on that, or is that building codes?
I mean,
That's
this
site
just
planning,
gets,
isn't it?
well, this gets captured somewhat with the stormwater bylaw working group, because their big focus is updating our bylaw and adding regulations for how much stormwater each property is required to retain on site. So that gets at some pieces of that.
Like there are already some, we establish some parameters for the fees, for example.
The utility fee structure.
Right,
Mhm.
but it has to do with how much.
Impervious.
Permeable.
Yeah.
Permeable
Permeable
space,
surface, yes.
right,
Yeah,
But in some communities, they give you a break on that. For example, if you put a swale in the
Mhm.
parking lot, I think that's kind of,
Mhm.
how do we encourage more of that?
Yeah,
So there is a stormwater bylaw working group.
yes, and they are supposed to have, I believe, recommendations in October. That's the goal for October town meeting.
So in a case like this where. Now, Barry, you made a very good point at some point here that flooding always gets. that raises awareness. Would we want to make a recommendation? I'm just saying, like, number two, when there's other, because we're sort of saying, well, hey, planning board. We're telling the select board, we think somebody else should be doing this, or you should be encouraging them.
Are you asking, should we recommend?
Well, I'm asking sort of more procedural thing in terms of our role, because I like the idea. You know, number two jumps out at me. And it's an actionable thing, and it's something that needs to be done and people could get behind.
I don't think there's anything wrong with us recommending anything to the planning board. They still set the agenda. for the
Yeah.
Planning board.
Yeah, that would be separate from what the select board's gonna, I would think. I would think for their priorities that they wanna come out with.
Yeah.
This is more targeted or specific for the planning board.
Right.
Other than, I mean, I'm sure there have some generic. Maybe that's a better way to address the select board, have a little more generic. Stormwater priority.
Right.
So to reword number one in terms of not just a targeted outreach, but to prioritize. Stormwater awareness and risks.
And develop, and you know, there's gotta be an action item attached, right? Develop some, you know, which we are, and we'll continue to.
Yeah.
Develop mitigation techniques and.
So we're sort of combining one and two, or
So just as like a legacy, just, I know that we're not the climate action planning committee anymore, but we are charged to recommend to the select board then. We send a recommendation letter to the planning board to adjust the
Yes.
solar bylaws, which they accepted with the select board's recommendation. The select board put it on their goals and said, we think this is important. They went and they worked it. So I don't think there's any wrong for, it's not wrong for us to recommend a bylaw. That's the most
Yeah.
impactful. way.
and to recommend, and that, thanks for reminding me of that, because to recommend to the planning board. Hey, this is a priority.
Again, they ultimately take it up and decide how to work it.
Right.
Was the recommendation then made to the planning board and then they responded and then the recommendation was made to the select board, or?
We did it simultaneously to
Oh.
both, so we sent a letter to select board saying, here are what we recommend the initial priorities be. One of these is a bylaw for solar, which we sent, and I think there was a second, I can't remember what the second item that we recommended to the planning board is. We sent a separate letter, so these are two that you might consider.
They were similarly worded. Letters. But basically saying. Yeah, now it's coming back.
I can dig those out.
Yeah, to the planning board, hey, we're recommending, this is the. You know, this is us, we're recommending. These things. That are your purview.
I mean, ultimately, I think this, we answer to the select board, but because of the decentralization. Of government, it makes sense to have these other communications, just say, here's what we recommended in case it comes to, this is why it came to you.
So we're gonna reword number one, or is it minuses? Is that what the recommendation was? Did you ask to reword one of them? Or,
I'm kind of thinking out loud and maybe looking for suggestions or thoughts.
They seem separate, don't you think, in a sense?
They flow into each other, that was my thought.
I do think they're separate, though. They're
You're right, they are.
they're separate, because who would be doing the action? They're very different people. I wouldn't expect the planning board to do anything about number one.
I really think number two is already in the zoning bylaws. That's a typical zoning bylaw in almost every city, state, community. No property can accept water from another property. It's against the law. So we can do a quick search of the zoning in the town, but I would be really surprised if it wasn't already there.
But it does happen in reality, right? I mean, we know
It,
that.
it happens in reality. And if it's bad enough, you can basically sue whoever runs water off your property. It's against the law to run your water off one property to another.
And
It's your
currently,
job to fix it.
I mean, as far as critical building systems.
That's a
That's
resiliency
something,
issue.
no?
That's totally
Yeah,
different.
but that's also, that's a building code, that's not a zoning issue anyway.
No, but it's depending on what town you're in the city of Boston, you have to do that automatically in
Right,
any
yeah.
new building. So that's something that can be taken up.
Lynn, do you know if it's against the law though for me to shed all my water down my driveway into the roadway? and then have
Technically,
to Run.
technically,
and
you're
then
not
run?
supposed to do that either. No, you can't pump it
Okay.
out of your basement into the local drain. You can't forcibly run it into your driveway, into the road, because it's a storm surge issue there. I mean, I can go through and read the bylaws. I don't do a lot of work in Needham, but we can go through and read it. Technically, those all exist in there as a stormwater issue across the state of Massachusetts, and I can't believe Needham hasn't adopted it. So
Well,
I
there
can,
is a
I can take a
stormwater-
look.
Yeah, there is a stormwater bylaw working group. So hopefully they're already looking at that. I would imagine they are.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do have a stormwater bylaw. We're just strengthening it with like the most recent precipitation data and doing like climate change, like.
So
Can I-
really, we're kind of moving toward number one.
Well, is your goal to narrow this whole list down?
I'm
to
just sort of,
two or
I
three?
think I'm just sort of, if we can narrow even half of them, or if people feel strongly. I like this one, or I don't, or when,
Sounds like we're saying number two is being done.
Underway.
Well, we can confirm that it's being done. So that would be only narrowing it up.
I just have a meta comment, which is that there's a lot of things that are in flight right now that are gonna take many months for the groups that are working on them. The tree bylaws, the water bylaws, the electrified Needham, which you're working, the pace. Do we need to add anything new this year? I'm just gonna be devil's advocate. Should we just work what's in front of us and make sure we land it this year?
we could reiterate, because one of the things, looking at the list, we're half these things are underway. And maybe the select board would appreciate not having new tasks, and to reiterate, let's continue the progress on this, and we're really looking at trying to integrate all these pieces.
Yeah.
So that they actually happen.
For the first year being a new committee, I would think you would want to just kind of land this one and really make sure that we accomplish what we say we're going to accomplish from the get-go. But is that? I feel like climate also is unfortunately sometimes a bit under a microscope of the current administration. So if we're saying that we want to accomplish all this stuff and we can't even hit the mark, then what kind of scrutiny does that put this committee under? What do you think?
I would be in favor of a smaller list rather than no list.
I would rather
or
like
larger list.
really execute electrified Needham very well this year. Hit our goals on the power. Needham,
Yes. Oh,
with the
we need a
electric
power choice.
Needham power choice.
Mhm.
You know, if anything, see if we can get some private. Companies, landowners to install EV chargers,
Mhm.
but other than that, I mean, if you were to accomplish just what's in flight this year. I think that would be a very impactful year. With respect to climate in Needham. I don't think we need to recommend anything new. That's my position.
I agree.
Should we remind the select board of what these things are?
I don't think it hurts to say these. are
Right, I
things
mean,
that are
because
flight.
really, I mean, in a way, what we're looking at with climate goals they're not 1 year things, the 1-year things that we recommended as the CAPC were not simple, but they were concrete. Hire Gabby. You need a power choice. Change it, and these are a little bigger, I think. And it seems that, a lot of things come under the umbrella of Needham Power, electrify Needham. In terms of solar chargers,
Modernization, electrification.
yeah, we've got things in play with trees and stormwater.
Mhm.
And to push on that, PACE really plays into. It stands alone, but also with the Electrify campaign.
There's definitely a connection there.
I don't know if this committee can support any of these projects, if anybody feels like they're not making, or any of these working groups, for example, committees not feeling like they're making sufficient project progress. I don't see anything that's like a must do this year beyond what's already happened.
Mhm.
So it seemed, it's like we should. Take what we've got in play and work it into. Probably. 3, maybe 4. Keep going on this. Type initiatives.
Yeah, Gabby, when you said before you prefer a short list to no list, were there any additional goals that you had in mind? And the second thought I had was we could try to specify some milestones that the working committees could be shooting for this year. I mean, that's getting a little more specific about, about pace of the work and what we're trying to tackle.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Because, well, the Tree Preservation Planning Committee just started meeting, so.
We've had one meeting and the next one is next week.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great to have a goal in mind for developing concrete recommendations for the town to implement, but I don't know what's reasonable to anticipate for pace with that group, like if a year would be enough time.
It felt like there was some very ambitious goals of trying to hold a public hearing before the summer. And I'm not sure whether we're on schedule to do that, but and I'm excited about the idea of funding for a tree inventory because studies the things that I've been reading and hearing about suggest that a tree bylaw is much more effective if it's done in the context of an assessment of what you have and what you're trying to protect. So I think I could try to help us come up with some specific targets, goals for the rest of the year. Yeah.
That would be helpful to include as a follow-up to the recommendation that the Action Planning Committee made for FY25.
No, I think it's an excellent idea because then we're not just reiterating the shopping list, but we're saying, well, okay, here's some. We're making progress. Here's what we think we'd like to see.
Yeah, target dates for
Yeah.
particular stuff.
Do the working groups have their own ideas of what their milestone objectives are?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Because I'm wondering if we're micromanaging what they're doing by saying this is what your milestone objective should be.
Well, also the milestones haven't been confirmed yet, right? Like I don't.
For the tree committee, it's still.
Yeah.
Still very early innings, yeah, but
Yeah.
I bet the stormwater group is farther along.
Yes, yeah, they're on track to have a proposal for October town meeting, so they're nearing the finish line.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if that kind of milestone idea is already in the thought process for these working groups.
I think we have to trust they are, right?
I think we have to trust, but we can also reiterate that we think a tree bylaw is important. And, even if we say something by town meeting, spring 26 or something.
I think one of the things that the committee is looking at, the tree preservation planning committee is looking at whether or not to recommend a bylaw. They might choose not to recommend a
Okay.
bylaw.
Yeah.
And then what would we, okay,
They might end up looking at like incentive options or
Right.
opportunities for working more with private homeowners to encourage tree planting. I don't know, I think everything's still on the table, but they
Yeah.
might not do a bylaw recommendation.
My view on it is that it's a very politically fraught issue and they don't need us looking over their shoulder while they're doing it. They should just do what they're doing and trust them.
Well, there's nothing really jumping out to anyone.
should we, we can, Gabby, maybe you and I, or you and Paul, try and consolidate these into, really focusing on what's already underway and
To reiterate. the
reiterate
continuance of
and,
those priorities.
I think in terms of the governance, that's less a select board, in terms of reporting on progress, that's less of a select board goal than our own thing. My thought had been over the summer, as we, start to see, well, okay, where are we, where are the little game pieces on the roadmap?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it would be good to talk about what that kind of reporting could look like. And I know other communities are grappling with this as well, as people are getting into, a year, 2 years, or 5 years with their roadmaps. So there's other examples out there that we could explore.
And then the first anniversary of this committee is September 25, so that's a time, to with our summer goals to look at, we could see what we've done.
Would be cool.
And it really, all of the government, I mean, especially 1 and 2 on the governance, reporting and educating. Kind of. That's our homework and not the select boards, in my opinion. I don't know.
So do you need a motion to consider regarding what we're recommending here?
Yes,
Well, I'll move that we not add new priorities to the select board's list for this year, or not recommend additional priorities beyond what is already in flight. And to underscore that we still support everything that's under flight.
I second that motion.
okay. And, early,
Yeah, just a quick comment. I noticed that there seems to be a theme of public awareness and education that crosses over all these areas. I wonder if there's some way to incorporate that kind of overarching statement. It's part of what we'd be recommending.
I think that could be, I mean, I think one of this originally comes out of, we had 6 working groups. And the 6 areas that everybody recognized there's an education component, and that kind of, I think, in a way, comes back to our own mission. Which is educating both within departments, but also at town meeting and the public as far as. What all these things are and why the pieces fit together. What do EVs have to do with flooding in Needham Heights.
Have we talked about sort of the best mechanism for doing that communication? I mean, do we wanna, at some point, sort of establish a quarterly, I don't know, quarterly newsletter of sorts that go to the town or get published somewhere or distributed somehow?
I think that's an interesting
Like,
idea, and we should probably vote on the motion,
okay.
because that's a really good idea. So. Anything else?
Unless the discussion that you brought this up for is adding this to the goals in a more robust way.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I was
think-
wondering if there's some overall statement or recommendation that
I mean,
incorporates it.
yeah, and that's actually a good thought, and that, you know, think about one of our goals could be establishing a regular, communication mechanism.
I guess, should that be a select board goal, or should that be an internal goal? Because it seems like we could
Yeah,
use some internal
I
goals.
think, yeah, I think that, I don't see that as a select board goal necessarily.
I mean, I think both of those tie back together with the comprehensive climate communication strategy, which I will say the select board did identify establishing that as a priority for FY25, FY26. That work has not started yet in FY25, and I anticipate will get picked up in FY26. But I think some of the action items from that strategy would be development of a regular communication mechanism.
And I think that. I'm probably breaking out the rules of order, but, you know, this could be something. Since we're spending less time discussing this, and maybe next meeting to sort of. Think about some goals for this committee and what, you know. We should be doing in terms of some of this communication outreach work.
Yeah, I mean, the climate communication strategy, again, like. I have not delved into that fully yet, so I think there's a lot of opportunities for recommendations from the committee. My hope is to work with Amy Helson on that, but. Yeah, we're kind of starting from scratch.
So even though we're starting from scratch, was that one of the ones that we did recommend and adopt last year?
We did not, the climate committee did not recommend that.
But
The select board
did.
felt that it should be included, so they recommended it.
Okay, so it's in flight, so to speak. If I'm
It's-
going
it
back to my
has-
motion,
yeah.
does my motion cut that out or does it keep it in?
No, I think it's still in
I
there. It's,
think-
it's a select board priority and
Okay.
it's in there for FY26, so it'll be there for the FY26, FY27 goals.
We should vote.
Yes, okay. So all in favor, Barry?
Yes.
Okay. Erwin?
Yes,
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Stephen? Okay. Okay.
I don't vote,
Mhm.
Erin votes.
You don't vote oh, Paul's there.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes.
Some towns parse out their communications, like we talked about, so they have these groups. that we
Yes.
talked about, who do that and manage their website and all this other stuff, and obviously costs money. So I guess we'll have to think about, you know, where the resources would come from or time
Yep,
for people to do this sort of thing. you know?
yeah. I think that will be a good discussion to have with the committee, because yeah, a lot of competing factors there.
I like the idea of having local people like us. Like, do some of the stuff. You know, because I think that you need to keep it close and local for people who understand it, if they're gonna adapt or adopt it themselves, you know, so. That's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, it goes back to something we discussed before about having. CAC members go to, you know, outreach to other
Mhm.
town committees.
Yeah.
Working groups just to,
Lynn talked about that for a while.
Yeah.
and when we did the roadmap, Stephen had a wonderful road show.
Mm.
Okay. Review of sustainability managers report.
I think the only items I just wanted to call out are, we did submit our Green Communities Competitive Grant proposal. That was for about $216,000, for Broad Meadow LED upgrades, Mitchell attic insulation. And then, we also applied for, condenser and evaporator replacements for the high school and Pollard walk-in freezers. So we'll likely hear about that award if we're selected in August.
Would that require a match?
So that one actually does not require a match. Yeah, it's one of the few.
What's the date when we find out for climate leader communities?
So we are working on the last piece, which is our municipal decarbonization roadmap, as you may recall.
Yeah.
We had a draft from Power Options, doing some work internally with building maintenance division and building design and construction to align that with capital planning. We need to have that roadmap adopted by the school committee and the select board by June 30th. So we have to get everything in by then to be considered for the designation. And then if we are approved, we would be eligible for grant programs starting in August. And then the only other one I wanted to mention was we did get an award for EA's Drought Resiliency and Water Efficiency Grant Program. That's a new grant program. And that was for about $14,000 for Memorial Field irrigation equipment upgrades to low flow, high efficiency equipment. That one also does not require a match.
That's
It's
the,
a
Very
much smaller.
specific number, you got that.
Yeah.
28 cents.
We applied for
It
the
is.
28
We
cents.
did it for 20 cents
Okay.
and we got it.
there probably won't be a rescission on that one.
It's very specific. And then we also submitted for our municipal vulnerability preparedness program action grant. Which is for about $383,000. And that's the one that's for flood modeling for the Linden Street sub-watershed. It would be designed for stream restoration for the drainage easement that surrounds the Linden Chambers property. And would include native wetland species introduction, and then would also include design for a subsurface flood storage and infiltration system underneath the High Rock School playing field. These are all just for design, and this one does require a match. 10%.
You know when we would find out about that?
This one is similar to Green Communities. We'll probably hear in August, early September.
Have we been impacted by any of the federal budget?
Nothing that we've applied for was federally funded. We did find out that our congressional earmark that we had applied for through Congressman Auchincloss's office, because of the way they because they ended up doing a continuing resolution instead of passing a reconciled budget, they did not include any congressional earmarks. So we were not included with that funding, but there were no congressional earmarks across the board. It wasn't just Needham.
Right.
But there's no funding that we've been awarded for sustainability that's like being clawed back by the federal government.
And the tax stuff is okay. With what you're getting, what's it called? You know, the say for the EVs.
Oh, I'm sorry, electric pay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the rebates, yeah.
Credits.
Those are still coming out. We've heard of communities as recent as January 26th getting checks, so checks are coming out under the new administration. There's been some staffing reductions at the IRS, so things are quite slow. But those rebate programs still exist at this time.
Yeah, I know our church is worried about it, but they've submitted tax forms
Mhm.
for it and, so.
Yeah.
Hopeful.
Definitely good to submit the forms. Yeah, so we'll see. At this time, those tax credits are still available. Yeah, any questions?
Good. Progress.
We'll close that because that has the agenda.
Mhm. Dates unrelated, Fred kind of gave us the tree committee update.
Good, yeah.
How big is that committee?
Like, almost 10, seems like, I mean, if you include the staff, yeah. Eight, maybe, 8 to 10. Yeah. There are a couple of developers, a couple of contractors,
Hey, who's chairing it?
I think Heidi Frail chaired the first meeting. Someone volunteered to be the vice chair, but I think she's still the chair. I think it's Hardy.
As vice chair,
Oh, Artie's vice chair?
I'm not sure.
No, it was one of the women in the landscape business volunteered to vice chair. Yeah, so you might know.
I don't know. I don't know. I thought it was somebody else besides Heidi, but.
I know the Charles River Watershed Association is developing. They've done some GIS systems analyses of changes in tree canopy coverage over the years, and they're developing some goals about this, and there's a plan to have them present at one of our meetings, but it's not scheduled yet. That's no other updates.
Good, thank you. Do we have anybody on the stormwater? I don't think so. Any,
I'd be interested in knowing what they're doing. I don't know if they can be invited, so I think.
Yes,
It's an open meeting.
That's right. I think there are minutes and. posted,
agendas and
right?
everything, yeah.
Agendas and minutes are posted.
Mhm.
Maybe even videos if you go to Needham Channel.
There are videos.
If you have a
Oh.
Saying, going to sleep.
I would know that. Okay, any other updates? And now our next meeting day.
Yes, we need to pick a different date because May 5th, the Monday, is the first night of town meeting, so.
That's not gonna work out.
Yeah, so we need to find a new date to meet.
Wait till after town meeting.
I would recommend it.
I would recommend it personally.
There's just no one gonna have bandwidth between now and then.
Yeah,
And the following Monday is gonna be town meeting also.
yes,
Which
yeah,
one?
Right.
special, yeah.
Would the 19th
Yeah.
be acceptable?
I think you have a tree meeting that night.
Yes, 7 o'clock is the tree committee.
We could do a 6 and at least you can leave.
Yeah, sure.
I'll be away that week, but go for it.
Where do you meet for the trees?
7 PM on the 19th.
Now, where do you?
Oh, where? In Great Plain River Town Hall.
Mm,
I could attend this by video.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Was that the new date then? May
Monday the
19th?
19th,
6
May
p.m.
19th, yeah.
Okay, I will find us a room.
You get us a room across the hall.
Just call them back in when we need them.
We lost our car.
Any
Then I
other,
can walk to the meeting, not save the planet.
Thanks.
Any other issues? Great. Any motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Well,
Aye.
Aye.
okay, Paul?
Other Paul?
Stephen, no, they both.
Steven,
Audrey?
aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.